This is the fifth video in a short series where we are discussing the wrath of God. What, when, how, and why is the wrath of God? In this video, we'll look at when the wrath of God is poured out. When is the wrath of God? There are many places that speak of the wrath of God in Revelation, and it's very important to understand when it's a future event, or in the timeline of the particular vision John is describing, and when that vision takes place. Revelation 6:17, 11:18, 14:9, and 10, 14:19, 15:1, 16:1, and 19:5 all speak of the wrath of God. In Revelation 6, 11, 14, 16, and 19, God's wrath is poured out, and in chapters 14 and 15, God's wrath is presented as a future event. Will the great day of God's wrath really come 5 separate times? And why would John, the writer of Revelation, present God's wrath as a future event in the middle of the book if it had already been poured out in Rev 6 and 11? To understand this, we must understand that the 6th seal, 7th trumpet, and 7th vial are all depicting the wrath of God, the final event. The wrath of God is poured out at the very end of the tribulation. Remember, the tribulation is Satan's wrath, not the wrath of God. Many people teach, and many believe, that Revelation is a chronological sequence of events, and that more than just the vials is the wrath of God. Again, not true. We can't read Revelation as a sequential record of events. Study the chart and compare what occurs in each scripture. Each of the passages are describing the same events that occur immediately after the tribulation at the Battle of Armageddon, same as the Battle of Gog and Magog. Notice that the seal, trumpet, and vial all have an earthquake, and the wrath of God is come upon the earth. Matthew shows the same events that also are shown in the 6th seal, and the events in Matthew happen immediately after the tribulation, which is when the Battle of Armageddon takes place. The islands and mountains moving, the great hail, God's wrath, and the earthquake from Ezekiel are the same as the 7th vial, and except for the hail not mentioned in the seal, it's also the same. Likewise, the 7th trumpet has the same events except for mountains moving. The Battle of Gog in Ezekiel is the same event as the Battle of Armageddon. The conclusion is obvious. All of these events happen at the same time, but they are described in several places in the Bible. If this is true, then Revelation is definitely not written in chronological order. To see the entire sequence of events in the order that they happen, watch our video on the Revelation Sequence of Events videos.prophecy html house Rev timeline. After Christ returns and takes us to be with him, he's going to pour out his wrath on the children of disobedience. It's only going to be a few weeks of time where that happens. And it's important to help understand that when we look at Revelation chapters 6, 11, 14, 15, 16, and 19, all talk about the wrath of God. And in chapters 6, 11, 14, 16, and 19, it talks about God's wrath being poured out. So, are we really talking about the wrath of God being poured out 5 times? And then we see in chapters 14 and 15, God's wrath is presented as a future event. If we read the book of Revelation as if it's a chronological, sequential record of events, why would John present the wrath of God as a future event if it's already happened? Why would he talk about it being a future event in chapters 14 and 15 if it's already happened in Revelation 6 and 11? So it doesn't make sense to read Revelation that way. We have to read it the way it was written. And the way that we understand it as written is that John records all the events and the visions that he saw. But they're not a sequential record. When we understand that everything is literally about Jesus and all of the prophecies converge on the day of the Lord, it all falls together when we also understand that the visions shown to John all lead to the day of the Lord. Some things happen prior to other things, but a lot of the things that John records is something happens and a series of events happen, and then he records another series of events that may be happening at the same time, which is what we see when we look at the sixth seal, the seventh trumpet, and seventh vial. We see that all of these records of these series of events all end at the same place. Everything literally leads to the day of the Lord. The revelation of Jesus Christ is what the entire book of Revelation is about. The sixth seal, seventh trumpet, seventh vial are at the same time as in Matthew, where Jesus says it's immediately after the tribulation. This shows that all these events happen at that time. And the same thing in Ezekiel, where it's the same as the seventh vial, where the battle of Gog and Magog is really another record of that same battle of Armageddon that we're told about in two different places. And when we look at all of these scriptures, these 5 in the chart, there's a lot of other scriptures that talk about this, but these 5 very clearly show us that all of these events are the same thing. When we look at it, we see that there's a great earthquake, that the sun, moon, and stars are darkened, that mountains and islands are thrown down, fled away, moved, and it's the great day of the wrath of God. There's lightnings, voices, and thunderings, powers in heavens being shaken, great voices in heaven. And then we have the great hail that happens in several accounts, and all these aren't happening at several different times. They're the same events being described in several places. And when we put it all together, that's when we get a full understanding of what it is and the timing of it. It all comes together so clearly when we understand how to read it. So when we look at Daniel 11 and 12, we're shown that the Antichrist reign specifically will be for 1290 days, or 3.53 years, from the time of the abomination of desolation to the end of these things. What Daniel's being shown there is the abomination of desolation. This is when the Antichrist sits in the temple of God, claiming to be God. As Paul tells us in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, that's the abomination of desolation. And then the end of these things is the last day, the day the Lord returns. So it's going to be 1290 days from that event to the last day when Christ returns. And then there's another specifically stating that there will be a time, times, and a half, which is in Old Testament verbiage. A time is a year, times is 2 years, and a half is half a year. So we are told again that it's going to be 3.5 years till everything is done, till all things shall be finished. And there is going to be a time of trouble in Daniel 12, such as never was, which is the same description of the great tribulation that Jesus talked about. And it says that the people that know God will be strong during that time, that some shall fall, but the wise shall understand, and the wicked will not understand. And blessed is he who waits until the 1335th day. So we're given several time frames. We're given 3.5 years, and then this one, which is slightly more, 335 days. There's an additional 45 days tacked on there. So when we look at this period of time, we see that the 3.5 years will be the time of the wrath of Satan, as I spoke about earlier, where Satan, in Revelation chapter 12, is cast to the earth, having great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. And we're given that same 3.5 year time period. And then, so it's going to be between this 1260 days that were given in some parts, 1290 days that we just saw, 3.5 years, 42 months, and Revelation 13 tells us that the Antichrist is given power for 42 months exactly. So we know that it's going to be this 3.5-year time period that the Antichrist rules and where Satan is cast to the earth. And then it's going to be somewhere between the 1260th day and that 1335th day, where he said, "Blessed is he that waits until the 1335th day, is because if you manage to survive the wrath of God, then you're blessed, because now you've got a chance to live into the 1,000-year reign and quite possibly actually find salvation. Blessed is he that makes it to that day." So it's going to be somewhere in that last 45 or 75 days that the wrath of God is actually being poured out. And like I said, in Revelation 12, we're seeing that the devil will be cast to the earth, having great wrath, knowing that his time is short. This time of trouble in Daniel is that last 3.5 years, which is the wrath of Satan. And the vials, as we studied in the previous video, are the wrath of God, and will be poured out in that last 75 days, possibly just the last 45 days. It's just going to be a few weeks of the wrath of God being poured out. It's not going to be a 7-year period. And in fact, as we see here, the last 3.5 years is the time of the tribulation. It's not going to be a 7-year tribulation period. It's a 3.5-year tribulation period when Satan is cast to the earth, having great wrath, and the Antichrist is actually in power during that time. Prior to that, in the first half of the final 7 years, will be when the Antichrist stands up, begins gathering power to take over the world. He'll create the fourth beast of Daniel 7 with a union of 10 Islamic kings, but he won't take over the world completely and utterly until the midst of that week at the 3.5-year mark, where then he will institute the mark of the beast and will be hunting down Jews and Christians. And it's going to be a terrible time of tribulation for the saints of God. It's not going to be for the world as a whole. Remember, they'll be partying it up. Just like we studied above, where at the time of the flood and at the time of Lot, Sodom and Gomorrah, the tribulation was for the saints of God, the people that loved God, not the people of the world. They were persecuted during that time. The world as a whole was not under tribulation. The people of the world were having a great time, ignoring God, going about sinfully, living their lives in wickedness, and everything that it tells us in the Bible. It's going to be the same at the last day, just like Jesus told us, as he said it would be as the days of Lot and as the days of Noah, where the world as a whole is not going to be under tribulation. It's going to be the people of God that are under tribulation. And when we see the abomination of desolation, then there shall be great tribulation, as Jesus told us. And it's immediately after the tribulation that we will see the sixth seal, the seventh trumpet, and will be gathered to the Lord at that time. And that's what begins the pouring of the vials. Again, the saints will not be here for the vials. The wrath of God is to destroy them which destroy the earth, those that are disobedient to God and do not love him. This is the end of part 5 of this series. We will continue our discussion on when is the wrath of God in the next video.